Good evening, everybody. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to come out tonight and participate in this vital program. My name is Murad Kabiri. I'm the city manager of Friendswood. To the chagrin of many in this audience, I won't speak very much tonight. I'll turn it over to other folks. But real quick, before I do, I want to take a moment to introduce who's in the room this evening. We have Councilmember Trish Hanks at the back of the room. We have no one else gets applauses, just Councilmember Hanks. We have Interim Public Works Director Renee Ibarra, our Fire Marshal Brian Mansfield, Economic Development Coordinator Karen Capps, our Administrative Services Director Katina Hampton, our Parks and Recreation Director James Toney. He's the most popular out of all of us, I understand. Yep. There you go. Our Library Director, Matt Riley. Our Communications Specialist, Jeff Newfer. Assistant City Manager, Stephen Ray, who's going to take over this evening. And before he does, and our Deputy Police Chief, Josh Rogers, that came in stealth-like. Before we turn it over to Stephen tonight to give some remarks and explain what this process is, I wanted the mayor to say a few words to get us kicked off. So, Mayor Foreman.
Hey, thank you all for volunteering to be on this, as Mo says it, vital committee. I appreciate you all coming out. You know, we kind of have a sneaking suspicion that we need to do some things that are at the bond level in funding here in Friendswood, and so we thought that we'd get you all together and let you decide if we can afford that, if what we need, things like that. And we could have done this a different way. We could have said, hey, we city council, we know best, you know, you guys elected us to make decisions, and we could meet with staff and we could decide what we thought we should put on a bond. But we didn't want to do it that way, you know, that we wanted to get input from you all. I think that's a smart thing to do. Frankly, you all know the city at least as well as most of us, probably better. You've been here a long time. So we appreciate you coming out and doing it this way. And it's going to be a process, I know. But I'll tell you, a few people have said, well, how much time is this going to take? And I'll tell you what my pastor said when he asked me to join a committee a few years ago. I asked him, how often do we meet? And he said, Mike, we only meet as often as we need to. I thought that sounded pretty good, but then I found out they needed to meet a lot, but it was not that great. But no, you guys are going to self-govern, so that means I'm going to leave. This will be the last time you see me until you come to tell us what you recommend. So you guys are going to determine who leads the team and how you break into groups or whatever you do. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, obviously, but Stephen will. But I just want to be here. Thank you all for doing this, and it is important for the city. So thank you, and I'll leave. Appreciate it.
Good evening, everybody. So, let's see. There we go. Figure out how to work it. So we all know why we're here, kind of, sort of. Citizens Advisory Team. I don't know if anybody picked up the little flyer in the back, and right up on top it basically says there was a proven process that took place back in 2013. Citizens just like yourselves, probably a lot of them, a lot of folks were on that 2013 committee here in the room this evening. We did have a I think it was about $24 million worth of bonds in 2013 that were passed for various infrastructure and facility improvements. We'll run through some of these PowerPoint slides. We'll touch on a lot of it, not everything. So basically, you know, a call went out and you guys answered that call. You're here because you're invested or you would like to be invested in the city of Friendswood. Here to, you know, many of you folks, you drive the streets, you see the drainage issues, you see some of the problems, or maybe some facilities you'd like to see upgraded. The city wants your input. City staff wants the input. City council, the mayor, they want your input on what you believe this city needs, what kind of and what kind of resources you would like to put back into the city. Purpose of the advisory team, we're all familiar with the damage caused by Hurricane Harvey. We all know that there's some evacuation and mobility enhancements that can that are of a big concern. What other types of improvements would you like to see? Whether that's with facilities, parks, drainage, streets. What else is out there that you believe in your everyday lives, as you go through the city? What do you see that you think needs to be improved? As we go through this, I think one of the big questions in 2013 was, what is a bond or a general obligation bond? The easiest and its most simplest term is it's similar to a home mortgage. It's a financing tool to fund large projects over time, over a multi-year period. And it also is a balancing act between repairing versus replacing with our infrastructure as it gets older and older over time. And it allows constant users, not just today and not just tomorrow, but users over the next 20, 30, 40-year period to pay for those improvements. Big question is, why issue bonds in the first place? We can put it off. We can not make repairs or not replace, but neglecting the infrastructure, as happened in many other cities across Texas, it becomes more and more costly over time to have it fail consistently and constantly and to go back and replace. Catastrophic failure eventually occurs if it's left unchecked, as just mentioned. And even with all the routine maintenance that our staff does with Public Works and the parks and facilities folks, things come to the end of their lifespan. They do need to be replaced and replaced with something that's going to last for another 20 or 30 years, if not longer. Many capital projects exceed the city's ability to fund on a pay-as-you-go basis. We would like to have every dollar that we need in our bank account to fund some of these items, but it's just not feasible and not possible. Going out for bonds allows the city to pay for larger projects, more expensive projects over a longer period of time. And some of the nuts and bolts of things, the credit rating of the city of Friendswood is a Standard & Poor's AA minus. That basically says that the city does have is a very strong to lenders, and we're viewed as having a very solid ability to meet our existing debt service obligations. We're a low risk for investment in lenders, and we're able to obtain lower interest rates on bonds. A bond election, which we're proposing in the this year in November, basically, what are we looking to provide with these bond monies? Drainage improvements, I think everybody can probably agree on in one shape or form. We do have a committee currently formed that's undergoing a very thorough process of trying to determine some of the city's needs. Are there other items out there? Going back to 2013, more than 80 residents, like yourselves, they reviewed the city's planning documents, our capital improvement plans, our comprehensive plan, our budgets, and other financial information were provided. They were kind of gone through by the separate committees as they split up, and basically we're looking for recommendations. The city staff provided their expertise, their information, along with other boards, commissions, and committees, basically just to gather facts, to allow these little subgroups to come up with the way they best felt to finance, to spend the money, to what facilities, to what projects out there were deemed worthy to go in front of the voters. And basically, their effort culminated in the 4 bond propositions you see up on the screen there. There's a new fire station headquarters and expansion of Fire Station 4, the expansion of our library, new parks and expanded services at the existing ones, and multiple road reconstructions, and ultimately $24 million worth of projects were approved. Up on the screen, there's just a few examples of those that were approved with the Fire Station 4 expansion. Library expansion. Some of our parks, Centennial, Lake Friendswood, and Stevenson Park, all received some type of upgrade or expansion. Got a couple of new softball fields, basketball pavilions with some parking lot lighting. This is trail at Stevenson Park. Splash pads and expanded parking. Got Lake Friendswood. And some field lighting, parking lot lighting out at Renwick Park. One of the big items were some Proposition 4 with some streets, Blackhawk and Marianne, Shadow Bend and Towns Road, among a couple of others, all had improvements. In our 2013 experience, the data developed highlighting the financial impact. You can take a look at the charts. They may be a little difficult to see there. But the chart on your right basically would show if all four of the bond propositions were approved, how much it would cost on a $250,000 valued home, and the way that debt service was paid out over time. And so one of the big questions that comes up is what happens if these bonds are not approved by the voters? What if you go through the work? What if you go through and you pick projects, you come up with an amount that is we believe is sufficient to send to the voters. If it's not approved, those projects don't just go away, but we will kind of just shelve them and table them until we can find the monies, whether it's a future bond package or some other avenue to move those forward. Another question that comes up is if we do pass a proposition and we can use, say we get street funds or we get funds for drainage improvements, if we have any left over, or can we possibly swap those instead of doing a drainage improvement, do a street improvement or something like that? Easy answer is just no. They can only be used for what they were intended for by the voters, and as it was described in the proposition that went before the voters in the election. So you're all here, so I think this is kind of an easy one to answer, at least for the most part on the surface, is if you're interested in serving. I know many of you, if not all of you, hopefully signed up in the back when you came in. You can fill out and submit the volunteer application. And what's going to become real important here in the coming weeks and months as we go through this is that website at the bottom, friendswood.com/CAT. As we go through these items, as information is requested and some of the capital improvement plan of the CIP and our comp plans, those items are going to be placed really easy, kind of separate from their current place on the city website. So as the groups are formed and people want to go find out information, it's all going to be placed there at that website so you can go directly to it and have easy access. And so back to are you interested in serving? This meeting being the kickoff is more of making sure that you guys here you need to submit an application, how to get in easy contact with us. We're going to have subsequent meetings where the various groups, whether you've, I believe in the past it was signed, they were split where you may have a financial group or a facilities group, drainage group, streets group. In this sense, as those groups form, decide on dates, we'll have city staff available to you depending on what group you're in. And as we get more information, a little bit more into the future here, we'll schedule subsequent meetings and make staff available. And with that, thank you very much. And Mr. Kabiri.
We shared with you this evening some of the experiences of the 2013 committee. Not necessarily to rehash the past, but show you what's been done with the previous 2013 group. So similar to y'all back in 2013, a number of you who were in the room participated in that activity, and y'all broke up into 4 small subgroups, drainage and streets being one of them, facilities being one of them, parks and recreational facilities, and then lastly a financial group. If you look at some of the slides moving back, Jeff, can we get that there? Thank you. This is vital in any one of your efforts. At the end of the day, you need to be able to show to the voters what impact the projects, if approved, will have on taxpayers, citizens such as us that live in Friendswood and pay the taxes. I know that a number of you may not know at this point what group or what area of interest you may have. We did leave a blank in the sign-in sheet, and we'll ask you to, if you haven't filled it in, to jot down a few ideas or areas of interest. We haven't yet established the next meeting, but at the very next meeting, we're going to spend a little bit of time going over all of our CIP projects within the next 5 years and beyond to give you all a flavor of what the needs are of the community. I will ask on certain folks in the community or the committee that were involved heavily the last go around to help lead the organization, getting them somewhat structured initially before everything moves forward. Folks such as Ron Cox, Skipper Jones, I know Robin was involved, and Craig Kitten was involved, Teresa. So as we get everybody's contact information together, we'll start setting out proposed dates for subsequent meetings and hope to get some feedback from y'all as to what areas you may be interested in to get us somewhat coalesced and moving forward. Are there any basic questions or any questions about the process or things we can help you get started? Skipper? So if we do have a bond election, it will be held in November of this year. We would have to call the election in August. So hopefully, if following a page from our last effort, the group provided recommendations to City Council back in June of 2013. That gave Council 2 months to review the request. We thought they would change some things up. Surprisingly, Council didn't make any changes, and it went to the voters in November of 2013. Other questions?
Will there be an opportunity to look at the financial structures and everything, what the capacity, bond capacities are and things like that?
Yes. Sorry, Katina, but we're going to volunteer you. No. Staff will be available throughout this process. So similar to 2013, as the various subgroups met and concerns were raised or questions were raised, we were there to be able to answer them as quickly as possible. If we didn't have the answer to your question, we would get you that information within the next day or two so that the group can continue their efforts and not be slowed down by lack of data or information. Yes, sir.
So when a group gets to a point of proposition to city council, like I said, later on towards August, is it gonna have to be just an idea on paper, or is it gonna have to be a full 3D drawing with permitting lined up?
I hope y'all can draw very well, but no, we're going to help y'all. So there are projects that we have already identified in prior years based on efforts of the bond committee last time. I think initially the bond committee recommended internally close to $100 million worth of projects. Ultimately, what it got pared down to was the $24 million that Stephen went over briefly with you earlier tonight. So we do have the capabilities to get certain renderings developed, especially if it was a project that we had already thought of in years past. For instance, we have talked about a senior center. I'm not suggesting that that project necessarily move forward. That's what this group is going to talk to us about. But we've done a feasibility study on a senior center, so we have some data that we can present to the group that y'all can evaluate, as well as if it's a project that y'all decide to move forward, that data can be shared with the voters on a potential proposition. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you share that, if you said there was $100 million, those projects that were considered and then pared down to 20? Can you share the ones that were weeded out the last time?
Sure.
So they can be reconsidered?
Be happy to. And just to give you all a background, the reason it was pared down is if we were to have issued $100 million worth of debt on our tax rate, it would have drastically impacted our tax rate. No offense to our neighbor in Pearland, but our tax structure in Friendswood is slightly different in that our debt service is such a small component of the overall rate.
Can I just throw out a review of what we did?
Yes, by all means.
So they gave us the $100 million that they wanted to do, and then everybody else threw in ideas, and then when we split into the groups, each group went and looked at what they wanted to do with that. So like the streets committee, like I remember they said they drove over one of those streets and then prioritized those. And then they had estimates on how much it would take to do each one of those. So every group came back to finance, while in the meantime finance was working with the city to say how much can we afford, what will the city not balk at, and so we can do X million dollars. And so I think the committee came back, all the committees together came back with more than the 24 million, and then we, between all the groups, hashed it out down to what was feasible. So even within your group, then when the larger group got together, then we all started hashing out and prioritizing. So it is a whittling effect, but we did have the full support of the staff and everything that we needed. So we started with their list, and then everybody kind of brainstormed it through their own end, and then the groups kind of self-maintained, so.
Other questions? So we'll be in touch with you. We'll pick a date for the next meeting to go over the overall CIP list. Later this week, we'll determine what that date is. The meeting won't be this week. I know spring break is next week for a number of y'all, actually everybody in the room most likely. So a number of y'all may plan on traveling, but maybe meet back again later in the latter part of March and go over the projects. And that'll give you all some time as well to try to determine what areas you want to provide support in. I know some folks that came in last time that were interested in being on the facility side ultimately ended up on streets and drainage or vice versa. So try to pick one or two areas. Y'all can't all be on one committee to the detriment of another committee. On the drainage side, we kind of have an idea. We've been meetings for the last, and I know Gail have been included your husband for the last 6 months. So we have somewhat of an idea of some of the things that we're looking at on the drainage side, but there will be other needs out there, and obviously we'd like some input. Yes? Sure. Yeah. Correct. And the groups that we had broken up in 2013 don't need to be replicated. I would encourage y'all to have a financial group. Simply put, the slide, especially on the bottom right, it was very effective in 2013. People can equate that to what it would do to their monthly income. So if you say on a $250,000 house, I'm going to spend an extra $7, that's meaningful to somebody that they understand whether or not the projects are worth it. Yes, ma'am. Hopefully, the May timeframe, we can have that information. Yes. The overall CIP. So if you go back to the slide with the website on it. So we've already populated this website with our capital improvement program as adopted in 2017. We've updated it with our comp plan, which is the comprehensive plan of the entire city and some of the direction we want to head. Our major thoroughfare plan, with obviously with evacuation being of concern. So we've put some information in there to provide some educational materials for the group. And then we'll also present it to y'all more formally so that we can explain some of the nuances with those plans. Yes, sir.
Is the application found on the website?
It is found on the website, but in case you don't feel like pursuing it on the website, you can also get it back here. But we have it on the website already. I'm not sure if it's on this particular, it is, it's already added. So it's on this website. You go there, you can download the application and fill it out. Tonight, okay. Thank you, Jeff. Other questions? Yes?
Is it a given that at the end of this, the city's in further debt? I mean, can we propose something about suggesting that the city council actually start putting a fund away to start prepaying for some of these things that we might want to have?
And that's perfectly, that's a recommendation that this group can make. Ultimately, with any of these projects, and I'll answer this twofold. With any of these projects, to put money away, you're going to have to increase the tax burden on the residents. So whether you're paying it in terms of debt service or you're paying it in terms of annual collection and revenue set aside for future expenditures, you're going to have to tax.
You earn interest in the meantime, or you pay interest in the meantime.
Correct.
Ultimately, you pay more, but you defer it.
Correct.
But that's an option.
That is an option. I will say the check engine light was very appropriate for this discussion. We're doing maintenance. The operations and maintenance component of your tax rate that pays for the facilities, the streets, everything you see out there only provides enough funding to do patchwork. It doesn't provide enough funding to replace it in its entirety. Regardless of the infrastructure you look at, this building included, eventually all the patchwork you do will not keep the building from having to be replaced in its entirety in some point in the future. Yep. Yes, sir.
Hey, Mariah, I think I recall in 2013, when we not only, as a larger group, looked at the projects, the capital projects and those kinds of things, but we also became more educated about the finances as a larger group. so we would kind of, as we broke into the smaller groups, we not only understood what the finance group was doing, but we understood what the impact of what we were thinking about was going to be.
Yes.
And if I'm correct in my memory about that, I would suggest we do that again.
And we'd be happy to do that. We can give a presentation on the current financial health of Friendswood. Other questions?
Mo, could you say something about the fact that we asked for the approval from the voters to get the authority to borrow this? It doesn't mean that we're gonna go out right away and borrow 25 million or 30 million. That
Sure.
It gets stretched out as projects come, the timing comes for them and city council approves them.
Sure. Very good point. In 2013, the voters approved $24 million worth of debt. Day one after 2013, we did not issue $24 million worth of debt. It was issued incrementally over a 4-year period, one, to limit its impact to the tax rate. So the slide you saw where the increase of taxes over a period of about 10 years, it actually never followed that trend. The debt was issued in such increments that it was more of a flat plateau and never got as high as what was anticipated. The other aspect of this is on the drainage side, we know that these projects are ones that are going to require partnerships with other agencies, both state and federal agencies. And even if you were to say you approved, ballpark number, not saying this is the number, but $30 million worth of drainage projects, we're not going to have the capacity to complete $30 million worth of drainage projects in the next 5 years. We're not going to have the partnerships in place to complete that amount of projects. So you may authorize the debt today, and it may be issued 10 years from now. Yes, ma'am.
And I think I remember on some of the bonds, some of the older bonds that we had, we were able to consolidate some of those and restructure some of those, so that we actually, the first year, had some savings that even though we were issuing new bonds, the rate went down.
So there was some refinancing of bonds involved. Around that time period, interest rates were at a historic low. So we were able to save on 2 refinances $1 million and $2 million in overall payments over the life of the debt. But there was also debt coming off the books because there are projects that were tackled years ago that were financed with a bond at that time that have since come off the books. And as you do that, capacity is provided. In addition to that, our tax base is growing. I understand every one of your valuations have gone up over the last X number of years, but separate from that, we have had new projects, new construction, new homes, new commercial come online, sales tax revenue that have helped reduce that burden. So that also allows additional debt capacity because it's being spread out over more properties. Yes, sir.
Some of the other constraints we had, basically, when we were on 2013, was we couldn't give you all those projects because the city, so you have resource constraints on your engineering side as well, is that not true?
That is true. We still have the same number of staff as we did in 2013. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want people to understand that, that's the other reason why you can't just do $100 million projects. Is that you've got to be able to support that.
Yes, sir. We're just a little bit older and less hair since the last time we did it.
At the time that you had to approve all of those, being the city manager, are you still playing that role, or do we have?
Well, the answer to that question is I am the engineer right now, but we are in the process of hiring an engineer as well.
So we'll have one additional.
Well, we have quite a few staff members here that are the eyes, the hands and feet that tackle these projects. So those guys are still here, and those guys are instrumental. I mean, Renee and his folks in tackling the projects in 2013. But yes.
How many projects are you managing right now? I mean, the city have,
Well, between the bond projects that were approved in 2013 plus what we have on the utility side, anywhere from about 25 or 30 at any given stage. Some of those are projects that we're tackling on our own. Some of those are partnerships with other agencies. So our involvement level fluctuates per project. Other questions?
Can you keep all the meetings short like this?
It is my intent. Having 3 night meetings this week, I would like to keep these short. All right. Well, thank you very, very much for coming out and showing interest in Friendswood. If you haven't signed in, please do so. We will be in touch later this week.